Morning, everybody. Welcome to the LitheSpeed webinar series. My name is Stephanie. I'll be around for the duration of the webinar if you guys have any questions. We do expect that the webinar is going to take the whole time, and we'll be taking those questions at the end. So if you'd like to ask our host anything during this presentation, just go to the questions box to the right-hand side of your screen and click on that button to type. Our host today is Roland Cuellar, back again with a very interesting presentation today on accelerating business side agility. Business agility has been a really hot topic this year, so if you'd like to ask us anything while we go along, please do submit those questions. And with that, I think we're ready to start. Over to you.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. I just want to make sure that you can hear me and that everyone can see the screen. Should be a slide up that says business agility, and there's a subtitle. There's nothing agile about working on requirements that are a year old. And I want to talk about what happens before IT projects even kick off. What happens sort of up front on the business side so that we can start developing products. This talk is going to be a case study from an actual Fortune 500 company that we've been working with over the last year or so, and we'll be presenting some of the methods that we used and also some of the results that they were able to achieve. So a little bit about me and about us. My name is Roland Cuellar. I've been doing the Agile thing now for quite a while now, almost 15 years. I used to be a software developer a very long time ago, and I'm the Vice President of our digital transformation practice here at LitheSpeed, focusing primarily on organizational change and process work and portfolio management, et cetera, et cetera. And LitheSpeed does a lot of Agile consulting and training in the areas of DevOps and leadership development and process design, change management, et cetera. And we have a lot of great clients that you can see down below there. A lot of Fortune 500s, a lot of financial services, not just financial services at all, but there's a lot of that. That's going to be our client today. The client that we're going to be talking about today, Fortune 500 company, financial services, pretty regulated, highly regulated industry, enormous scale, and all of the challenges and complexities that come with that. I'm going to go quickly through the first few slides just to sort of very quickly level set and kind of get us into the conversation. I think, you know, all of us who have been going down the Agile path have been trying to move away from this kind of development scheme that's shown on the screen here, this typical waterfall approach of doing a lot of upfront requirements analysis, which can take a long time, and then going into a long design phase, then finally starting to write code, and then have testing at the end, which usually uncovers lots of defects, lots of questions about the requirements. It's usually in the testing phase that we find out that the requirements weren't even necessarily agreed to or right or had sufficient clarity, or that people understood them all in the same way. There's a lot of us and them in this model because the process usually sort of follows the org structure and all the organizational silos, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, this is something that the whole Agile movement has been trying to break for some time now. And many of us have been going down the Agile path for you know, these reasons, wanting to improve our visibility and see where real things really are in terms of measuring performance based upon what's actually been completed and done, and the measurement of working software. And also for its adaptability, the ability of Agile processes to adapt to change better. They can be very fast, reactive, responsive kind of processes which are needed to be able to keep up with all of the changes that are coming at us these days. The lower left graph there, accelerating business value and using Agile to start delivering product early and deliver it often for the sake of our customers and for the sake of cash flow or revenue or cost savings, and also for the sake of learning about what the market wants, what our customers want, what our clients want, and also learning about our process and improving that, and lowering risk, dealing with the risk up front. And trying to buy that risk off sooner as opposed to pushing it all the way out to the end. And so Agile methods, when done well, can give us all of these things. However, a lot of folks that we work with started their Agile movements really in the IT space. They saw it as an IT thing. as a software development thing, and as a way to accelerate software development and perhaps lower software costs. I don't know if any folks out there have ever sat down and just tried to figure out how much a software development project of any size costs, but it is extraordinary, and those numbers can be kind of scary when you start to add up all the hourly rates times the number of people involved times the duration of a typical project. The numbers are staggering. So there tends to be a lot of focus on how can I make IIT more efficient, faster, i.e. how can I have it cost less. And so that's historically one of the reasons why Agile tends to be seen as an IT initiative. It's oftentimes about improving the efficiency of that function. But even within IT, there are a lot of different parts to IT, and Agile is often mostly viewed as a development activity. Sometimes there are still additional test and QA activities that come after the development is done before we can go into production. And then you've got the operational support staff. And then there's the really huge gaping question of where is the business in all of this? And is the business Agile, and how do they fit in? And that's what I really want to talk about. What I want to talk about today is where is the business in all of this, and how can I better tie all of this together to create more of an end-to-end Agile solution, and what might we be able to achieve with that. So the common reality in a lot of organizations that we work with is that we have this sort of water, scrum, fall process, if you will, a mixture of waterfall and scrum. Oftentimes upfront on the business side is still very waterfall in many organizations. The business will want something. They'll need capabilities developed or new products or new features. And oftentimes there's a funding process involved in all of that. I've got to put all the requests together. I've got to put together a business case. The business case has to go through the annual funding cycle where we compete against all of the other business cases to get approval. In fact, that's going on in a lot of organizations that I work with right now. It's kind of funding season. Everyone's getting their business cases and et cetera, project plans and estimates together so that they can start to get money for next year. So that's an interesting idea. Let's think about that for a minute. There's stuff that the business wants and needs that they're already thinking about right now. They're going to put together their business cases over the next few months and try to get those approved. That means that IT might actually start working on the work sometime next year. Oftentimes these projects can be a little bit large, and it could be months before something actually goes to production. So even in this simple case that I'm talking about right now, it's very likely that the things that IT delivers in the middle of next year is something the business is actually asking for now. And that leads me back to the subtitle of this presentation. There's nothing agile about working on requirements that someone wanted a year ago, right? And so there's a lot of upfront waterfall thinking on the business side in most organizations. Now that we've spent 6 months to a year getting all the requirements and funding and the money in place, now there's all this pressure on IT to go faster. Hey, we're behind. We got to get this stuff, done right away. They didn't, sometimes there wasn't that same attitude on the upfront part of the process, but there's a big focus on getting IT now to deliver it quickly. And so we tried to use Agile and Scrum and iterative methods there in the middle to deliver it. And then there's the challenges in the last mile and going to production. A lot of DevOps and things of that nature can certainly help in that area. I'm going to focus today on this upfront part of this process and how we get the water part and the Scrum part working more closely together to accelerate the overall throughput and the overall delivery. Okay, so even with Agile in place in the IT organizations, the process is often still long and linear and not really responsive enough. I've got this sequential front end, which might have long-term planning and short-term planning and funding and business cases. I might need to go through and then do detailed requirements gathering and analysis. And finally, we're ready to start actually doing the development in the middle, that iterative part. There's a lot of sort of sequential one-directional information flow here coming towards IT. IT is often not involved in these discussions until kind of late in the process. This often still results in rather large and infrequent deliveries. There's oftentimes a lot of requirements coming into IT at once in sort of a big batch. And then IT is going to sort of prioritize those, or the product owner may prioritize those, that IT will iterate on those, but we're still working on a large batch of requirements that have come in all at once. There's still a lot of handoffs as the different people work on different parts of this process, and it's just not very well integrated and can be somewhat inflexible and tied to this rigid annual funding cycle in some cases. So I've got a little discussion here, and I think Stephanie, we're going to put up a little polling question. I wanted to find out, from the folks who are out there right now, to the best of your knowledge, and a lot of people don't even know, and it's okay if you don't know. You can take a guess. How long does it take, from the time the business thinks that they want something or discovers a need, from when IT is actually able to start working on it? It's gotten put into a business case, it's gone through the portfolio review boards, it's gotten funded, we've got resources and money allocated to it, some initial set of requirements have been developed, and now IT can actually get started building stuff. And I want you guys to take a guess or let us know how long do you think that takes in your organization? 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days? More than 120 days. It's just not at all uncommon for it to be between 6 months or more. So let's go ahead and get those answers.
Yeah, we'll leave this poll live for just a couple more seconds here. All right, looks like we've almost got everybody voting. All right.
Very good. Okay, and so this looks, not too surprising. There are some folks who are able to get this whole process through rather quickly, 30 days to 60 days. Those are some great numbers. But for a lot of folks, it's more than 120 days, and that's sort of the problem that I want to talk about today. Is for anything beyond that 90 to 120 day time frame, what are some ideas or ways that we can make the whole business agile, the whole business more responsive? How can we get all of these processes lined up and supporting each other so that we can be more responsive to our customers and to the market? And so that we can start creating solutions a little bit more dynamically. Okay, so now that's been up to this point kind of setting up the problem, if you will. What's the problem that we're trying to solve? And now I want to talk about an actual client case study. It's part of an overall digital transformation effort and trying to gain some business side agility. Our objectives, or I don't want to say our objectives, the client's objectives in this particular case were to test whether Agile and lean practices could accelerate time from inception to development start. Can I get to development faster? Can I accelerate the overall end-to-end delivery schedule, not only just from the business side into IT, but from the business side into IT and all the way into production? And I don't want to do this in ways that that hurt the team or that hurt people or that cost more. So can we also improve teamwork and improve efficiency in staffing, et cetera? So can I go faster and can I have it cost less? And can we do this in ways that that our teams like working? So that's a pretty tall order. And we'll go through some of the steps now that we took to see what we could do to achieve some of these outcomes. Okay. So with this client, we worked with them closely and agreed that we were going to do really sort of seven steps to 7 initiatives, if you will, change-related initiatives to try to achieve these outcomes. And so the 7 things that we felt that we needed to do in order to accelerate overall business agility were moving to different team structures that are more around products and value streams as opposed to being organized around projects. And I'll go into each of these in more detail. There's at least one slide on each of these. Can we move to more product type of thinking as opposed to project type thinking? And I'll explain that. Can we change the unit of work to be minimum viable products or minimum marketable products that make those the units of delivery? Can we get to a more continuous flow of requirements instead of having all the requirements come into IT simultaneously? What do we need to do from a DevOps and engineering practices standpoint to help automate and accelerate delivery into production? And what about the innovation process? How do we even figure out what it is that we want and need, and what it is our customers are requesting, and what's going on in the marketplace? If that process is really long, then we're still going to have a long lead time in order to get new ideas into production. And then finally, we need some sort of portfolio management over all of the stuff above to provide guidance and management and governance, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the 7 steps, and I want to go through each of those next. The first thing was really we dealt with were some of the structures involved. And many organizations are still very siloed around functional specialties. I've got portfolio managers who are in one part of the org structure, and I've got business analysts who are in another part of the org structure, and I've got architects who are in another part, and developers and testers, and so on down the line. And in any large, complex organization, seems like there can just be dozens and dozens of different functional specialties, reporting up to their specialty management chains, if you will. And what we wanted to do was really bring all of that together end to end. Now, I think a lot of us in the Agile community have heard about cross-functional teams and have tried to practice cross-functional teams for a long time. And what we decided to do with this model was to just take that idea and extend it further upstream and further downstream. So, and by that I mean, on a typical little, 10-person Agile team, we have our developers and testers and maybe some BAs all working together. But if I extend that further upstream, can I get some of the planning people involved in that? And can I get some more senior product management as part of that? Can there be innovation and testing and learning kind of people involved in that product as well? And then also the run support and operational measurement. Can I bring some of that so that I have the whole end-to-end life cycle organized around each of these products? So in this picture here, I've got products 1, 2, and 3. Each product is supported by a product manager. And now I've got prototyping and R&D and the delivery life cycle there, those little Venn diagrams, and run support, all sort of virtually. We haven't made changes in hard line reporting so much. But virtually all reporting out into the product manager and working all very closely together in the support of their product. This creates sort of little entrepreneurial units inside the company, sort of a company in a company. And each entrepreneurial unit is beholden not so much to their functional manager, but to having a successful product. And they're working very closely together. They get to focus on that product over the long term. Become experts in that product domain and those particular customers and those particular user experiences. And they own it front to back, all the way from prototyping what it is we think our customers want and learning what our customers want, all the way through to the running and supporting of it. Big challenge is sort of pulling this together from an HR perspective and a reporting structure perspective and dealing with the change management of this, but this creating little entrepreneurial companies within the larger company is proven so far to be very effective. I'm going to go ahead and move on. So that was the first thing around this. The second piece of this, though, is trying to have it be what I'll call omni-channel, and perhaps some of you know what omni-channel is. In the digital world, there are many ways that our customers come to us to interact with our services. They may come to our website and start some work or do some work on the website. They may pick that up later and interact with us through a mobile app. They may call on the phone and interact with us through a call center. And nowadays, they may even interact with us through voice, if you will. And so what we wanted to do was to bring all of that together into a single product, if you will. In a lot of organizations, for a variety of reasons, products have become synonymous with IT platforms. In many organizations, the mobile app, say, is treated as a product in and of itself, and the website is treated as another product. And that even though the mobile site and the website may both need to support similar functionalities, they're sometimes treated as separate products with separate teams and separate requirements, all of which leads to extra costs and extra time and a lot of redundancy in some cases, and also sometimes a lot of divergence, if you will, that what you can do on the website you can't do on the mobile app, and vice versa, because they've been treated almost as separate products developed by separate teams with different product managers. So what we wanted to was define our products really around the customer experiences, things that customers want to do. And these products, our product managers are studying and focused on delivering these great customer experiences, whether it's on the web or the phone or mobile app or voice, etc. And so these teams are omni-channel in how they work. The business wants to do something, and this team is going to develop the UI and the user experience and the requirements. And those requirements may actually be realized on multiple platforms. That same set of requirements might go to the mobile team and several web teams, and maybe even a voice integration team, so that all three of those teams are developing similar capabilities. They may not all go to production on exactly the same day, but all of the platforms are staying in sync with each other with regards to the capabilities that we're rolling out to our customers, and customers get a consistent experience no matter how they come to us. Now, the result of this is that we get some convergence of functionality, that all of the applications, work in similar manners and have similar capabilities. We also get significant speed savings from this because we're not doing the requirements. We're not developing 3 sets of requirements for 3 different platforms, even though the requirements might all be very similar. We're able to go faster because we're not doing everything 3 times, and we're certainly saving money because we're not doing everything 3 times. So this has had a number of impacts, a number of positive impacts along several different axes, if you will. Maintaining consistency, removing redundancy, accelerating time, and also reducing costs. Okay, the next thing that we wanted to deal with, once we got some of the structures in place, was the whole project mentality thing. And a lot of us work in projectized organizations, projects, and have become really sort of synonymous with the way things have been done and delivered over the last decade or more, probably 2 decades, in fact. And project management and project mentality has brought a lot of good things to IT. There's no doubt that more discipline was needed, but all isn't necessarily well. There are some issues around project management that can lead us down, I think, the wrong path. They don't have to, but for some reason they often do. For instance, I was talking with an executive recently saying that, I think that we need to accelerate, delivery, and we need to go to production much more frequently. Can we go to production every month or so, as opposed to where they were before, going to production very infrequently? And this executive said, well, I don't think we can make our projects that small, right? So that should hopefully make you pause and think a little bit. The thinking there is that a project, this executive in their mind, a project is equal to a release, and that's not how we want. That's not how we want to operate. We'd like to be releasing early and releasing often, and that's sort of one of the basic tenets of Agile, right? We want to deliver value early. We want to deliver it often. We want to learn from that delivery from both a product and a process standpoint. We want to start getting all of the upside of getting functionality and features out there, and start realizing the benefits. And so a project doesn't have to be a release. A project plan could plan to have releases every month or every 2 weeks or every day. But very few people actually set up their projects that way. They'll often set up their projects as a bunch of Agile Scrum type iterations with a single release at the end, or maybe a couple of releases at best. They just see that pattern a lot. So, and it doesn't have to be that way, but projects do tend to gather up a lot of requirements up front. They tend to force this big batch approach to delivery. And unfortunately, in a lot of places, the internal governance starts to become a lot more important than customers. I just often will see that people will not want to take changes into the project or change the priorities of the project or add new features or take features out or make adjustments to scope or anything else because it will hurt the project. And it's not what the project was scoped out to do. It's not what the project was approved to do. It's not in the scope of the project, et cetera, as if the project were the important thing. And the project isn't the important thing. The whole projectization is a tool to help us deliver functionality to the business and functionality to our customers. And sometimes I think that the governance starts to get in the way of that. And also projects, they tend to not, they have a harder time being flexible enough to handle the constant change. Like I said, it doesn't have to be this way, but these are the patterns that I do tend to still see in a lot of organizations. What we wanted to do is go to more of a product mentality. Products require significant strategy, and they require this relentless customer focus. And customer wants and needs are constantly changing. There's a frequent competitor analysis if you're in a competitive environment as to what other folks in the industry are doing. Now, what I see a lot of is that we'll look and see what other competitors are doing in the industry, and we'll see what customers are asking for, and we'll batch all of that up and put it into the business case and go through the funding cycle so that once again, a year from now, we're starting to address the issues that we know we have right now at this moment. And so that whole way of thinking about this is just so slow. Well, we'll get to some more ideas about dealing with that, but frequent competitor analysis, frequent market surveys and market data, it just requires a lot of pivots, a lot of changes and a lot of adjustments and some really strong product ownership. And the traditional project management sort of tool set doesn't often focus enough on these important areas. It's not that it can't, but once again, sometimes the project in many organizations becomes more important than the product. And we're really trying to focus on the product here. We worked with this Fortune 500 company to really rethink of what the project is. And what we came to some agreement on is that the project is a funding model. Right? It is a way to get money, and it is a way to manage the spend of that money and also try to manage some of the expected outcomes of this investment, and to put some basic schedules in place and timelines and a basic level of spending and resource management, et cetera. It is not to get detailed requirements way up front. It is not a checklist of did you deliver everything now that we asked for a year ago, because that can and should change as we pivot based upon customers and competitors. So we wanted to elevate our project charters and funding model and just the whole mentality to be a higher level, focusing on business outcomes, customer outcomes, client outcomes based on a certain level of spend. And we're going to flex our requirements as needed in order to achieve those outcomes. Now, in order for us to do that, we have to rethink what the requirements are and how we deal with them and at what level of granularity they are. So we decided that we were going to move to MMPs as our sort of new unit of work, the minimum marketable product. And the minimum marketable product, you can just think about, I like to think about it as a handful of user stories that fit together to solve some basic customer-client need. They work together harmoniously. They deliver some level of feature or some level of capability, and they're somewhat independent. And they can go out together. I can ship them and deploy them, this handful of related user stories, and they achieve something on behalf of the user. So it's bigger than a single user story, but less than an entire project for sure, and maybe even just a subcomponent of a higher level capability. So this is becoming our new unit of work, if you will. What we're able to do with this is go to sort of a finer level of granularity of what we're going to deliver and when, and decide where we're going to put additional resources and time into developing all of the detailed requirements around these. I think it'll become clear as we go through this, and I'll show you some additional diagrams of what this actually looks like. When I have this unit of granularity of the MMP that is going to be our requirement, I can start to be a little smarter about the path that MMP takes in order to get it into the hands of developers so that we can get it implemented and into production. Okay, and we want to be a little smarter about this. In the old days, we kind of took every requirement down the same path, whether it needed it or not. Right? We would go through all of the steps of the analysis in order to get it dev ready, if you will. And as we're working with these MMPs, though, in these smaller units of functionality, I can talk to architects and tech leads and the development team and say, hey team, this is the next capability that we would like to push out into production. What information do you need in order for you to have a dev-ready requirement? And they may say, well, we're going to need some more focus on the UI. Maybe we're lacking clarity on how that's supposed to work. And there are some business rules that we're unsure of how that's supposed to be handled. And then there's some edge cases. We don't know what the system should do and if this scenario pops up or that scenario pops up. Can you dig that stuff up for us? Well, now our analysts, our business analysts and our architects and some of those other folks can start to do work on getting the requirements and detail that the team needs in order to get dev-ready stories. And so we can start to be smarter about the level of time and investment that we put into requirements analysis and do that which is necessary and not do that which isn't necessary. It can also be the case where it's likely that you go to the dev team and say, we want a capability to do X, and we talk about that for a little bit, and the team says, yeah, I think we know what to do. We don't have a lot of questions about that. We could get started on that right away. We've got a couple of things, but they're not showstoppers. Let's go ahead and get started on that, and can you dig up a couple of these details for us that we're still unclear about? And so not every requirement would need to go through every single step. And so we can be smarter about the level of effort we put into requirements. We came up with 3 high-level, if you will, process steps that we called discovery, refinement, and delivery, basically. But discovery is trying to discover, and this is really the business side and our product managers and product owners and product leaders and marketing people trying to discover what is it that we want to build next. What are those MVPs and MMPs that we think customers want? What have competitors come out with that we need to respond to? What is our release plan? When do we want to launch something and what? And how do these things fit together from a story map, roadmap kind of standpoint? And so that's our discovery process, if you will, and it's led by our most senior business folks. The refinement step is taking those MVPs and MMPs and capabilities and getting them dev ready. What is the UX and UI that's needed? What are some of the business rules that are needed? What are some of the acceptance criteria that are going to be needed, et cetera, et cetera. But once again, doing that which the team needs and not necessarily taking every single requirement through every step of the process, whether it's needed or not. We're going to talk to the team, find out what they need, and use this refinement step to get the team what they need. And then those, what's coming out of that are dev-ready stories that can now go into the team and be executed upon in an agile kind of way. So that all of this thing, the way up front business part of figuring out what we want, the refinement step of getting it dev-ready, and the delivery part, sort of Scrum delivery model, are all much more closely linked together and fairly dynamic, so that you can get to something that looks like this. This is a big portfolio board, which shows on the far left, up at the top, you can see it says Discovery. These are items that are currently in Discovery. Trying to figure out what those MMPs and MVPs are and the priorities of those. The next big section in the middle, which is the refinement step, getting things to dev ready. And then on the far end of the board, which you can't really see very well, are the things that are currently in the hands of the development teams using Scrum to deliver. Each of these cards isn't a project. It's much smaller than that, and each of these teams isn't a story. They're bigger than that. Each of these cards represents an MMP or an MVP, a minimum viable product. Each of these will probably get turned into a handful of user stories that the team will implement. But you could almost think of each of these cards as a feature, if you will. And these features are able to flow through the whole process independently of each other. We're asking the business now to prioritize what feature do you want next? What is the next most important feature that we want to roll out? And we'll get started on that. And so all of these features are flowing through independently of each other. Each row on this board represents a different product. So I'm able to look at this board and see across half a dozen or so different products, what are the features that are rolling out for each of those products? And are there any dependencies across those products? And we can start to line those up as well. So the different features across different products may need to go out together. Different people use this big board in different ways. The business and executive people come to prioritize the work and see where everything's at, and have discussions around what we want to launch next across the different products. Project managers come here to look at all of the features that are currently in flight and try to understand what the dependencies are and where the timing needs to be adjusted, be aware of what's coming and when it's coming and to which teams, and where there are dependencies across teams. It's a highly useful board, and it's very well used. Also, it appears to be a very linear process, but it doesn't have to be. A card can skip columns. If it doesn't need a certain kind of analysis or a certain kind of work, it can go directly into the dev team. If it needs to go through a long discovery or long refinement process, then so be it. But it can be a non-linear flow from left to right. Things can skip steps if it's okay. And it's very dynamic. We can change the priorities of these features, and they're all able to flow independently of each other. Another thing we needed to deal with was, where does stuff on that big board come from even? What is the research that's going on with regards to what's happening in the marketplace, what's happening with competitors, what do customers say that they want, what might we be able to offer customers that would be valuable to them? So a similar process even up front on a separate board to deal with our innovation and research, if you will. Doing some quick testing and experimentation, making decisions about which experiments were successful and which ones weren't, where we want to actually build out real production level capability based upon the outcome of our research and the outcome of our experiments and focus groups or trial launches or prototypes or whatever. And in a lot of organizations, this can be a really long and linear kind of paper-heavy process sometimes, and we've just tried to make it quite a bit lighter, quite a bit faster. And the successful experiments and prototypes that come out of this little process can then go on to the big board where they're actually turned into, you know, production-ready features, if you will. I'm not going to talk about this one very much. There's a lot of information out there about DevOps and automation and, you know, all that sort of thing. I'll just say that in order for us to deliver at the speeds that we need to deliver at and what the business wants and what customers want, this client that we've been working with had already made some substantial investments in engineering practices, decent levels of test automation, deployment automation, standardization of environments, et cetera, automated security scans, and that sort of thing, which certainly allows for faster development cycles and faster deployment into production. And then sitting on top of all of this is this portfolio management layer. I've got to have a group of senior executives who are looking at product strategy and customer strategy and competitor strategy, coming up with roadmaps where we want to take these products. They've still got to do business cases if necessary in order to get funding for next year. And also getting roll-up data and metrics and results from each of these product teams and responding to that. And agreeing as a group on what are the priorities for the next month or for the next quarter along all of these products. What are our target launch dates? What is the data telling us in terms of results on spending and new revenue, and what's our velocity? What can we commit to? Those kinds of things. And so we definitely still need this portfolio management function, but portfolio management now is changing to be much more dynamic, trying to focus on delivery. In a lot of organizations, portfolio management tends to be a financial function in terms of just really watching the spending, if you will. And we still have to watch spending, of course, but we're trying to change portfolio management to be more of delivery enablement and delivery management. And are we getting stuff out there at the rate that we need to get it out there? And are we executing the right priorities? Which is actually easier to manage, I think, when things are flowing independently. I think it's harder when you've got a whole bunch of simultaneous huge projects that are simultaneously going on, and they're all barely moving forward because they're fighting over the same resources, and nothing's really being delivered, although you're spending a lot. We're trying to get to the case where we're actually delivering much more frequently. And so we were able to achieve some of that. I want to talk a little bit now about outcomes, and then we should have a few minutes left at the end for questions. So here's the outcomes of some of the work that this client was able to accomplish. First thing was, and these are their numbers, they were showing about a 64% improvement in the business side velocity. So from the time the business wants something until when IT is able to start working on it, we had an average drop of 64% and a median drop of 72%. That's because there were some outliers there, so we measured both. But still, just significant improvement. I mean, it would be hard to find any business that didn't want to achieve 60 or 70% improvements in anything, and these are like crazy, outrageous kind of numbers, but very possible. And at the same time, 16% reduction in expenses, just less of people's time going into all the upfront activities and trying to be smarter about that, putting the time where it's needed, and also reducing some of the redundancies in requirements across different platforms. And concept to cash, as short as, and I've got on the next on the next slide, I'll show you some of those numbers in terms of overall throughput. So this is the requirement side of the house. And we did a couple of pilot projects around this. Well, one particular minimum marketable product, a feature, if you will, had 22 days from the requirement start to delivery start, which is very fast for them, because like many of you reported, it might be 120 or 180 or more days for when you could actually start on some of your features. One of our MMPs was 22 days. For another one, it was 11 days, and then it went into production very quickly and had almost immediate revenue gains. We were able to see people using the functionality, and that was driving additional revenue, which could be seen and counted almost immediately, and it was millions of dollars. One of the nice things about working this way, when you put a big release into production with a whole bunch of features that go in simultaneously, sometimes it can be difficult to determine, well, which of those features are people actually using, and which of those features are actually paying off financially for us? Because so many things changed at once, it's hard to know which of the changes were most impactful. But when you're deploying individual MMPs on a regular basis, you're delivering more frequently, but each deployment might only have a few changes in it, and you're able to measure a little more finely what people are using and if they're using it at all, and what the gains are from it. We can get better ROI and better usage and customer data because we're changing only a few things at once. So we're able to have finer grain measurement, which is always a great thing in terms of informing our future development and investments. So all of the work that we're talking about here is pretty much in line with the trends in digital transformation that are out there. If you go to, for instance, Bain Consulting, I think this chart comes from them. They'll say that IT and business need to partner much more closely, that we need to go to more of a product model approach, that we need Agile and DevOps delivery, that we need a customer view as opposed to a platform view, which many organizations have, et cetera, et cetera. And these are the things that we've tried to do. If you go to McKinsey and Company, they'll say the same thing, on the right-hand side, that we should have product-based focus and product-based organizations, and that we should have strong product owners and embedded business with IT, et cetera, integrated roles, more dynamic budgeting and more dynamic funding. And we've tried to get to all of these things as well. So they're commonly touted practices, if you will. Actually putting them in place is always a big challenge. It was not trivial getting all of the changes I've been talking about up and running, but they've been very successful to date so far. And so now there's talks about scaling that out further within that client organization to include more and more potentially teams working in this fashion. But these changes are not easy, obviously. And that really is the bulk of the presentation there. A lot of the issues that people have with delivery are around structures and heavy linear processes that are still out there, even though we've tried to go down the Agile delivery path for some time in many organizations. But there's still a lot of opportunity on the table to further accelerate and to further be yet more dynamic, more reactive to changes in the environment. And in most places, there's still plenty of room for improvement. So I'm going to stop here in terms of slides, and now we can go to some questions if there are any.
Yeah, we definitely have some questions, and we actually had a couple that came in before the webinar even started. I definitely wanted to make sure that we got a chance to engage with those a little bit first.
Okay.
So if we start with those, first question coming in, what's the first engagement step when moving customers towards Agile approaches to development?
Okay, I think obviously, or maybe not obviously, really the first step is making sure that we get the leadership on board and that we have clear goals, with the leadership. I think in a lot of organizations that we work with, there's usually a strong support for change at the executive level. The C-level usually wants to shake things up in most places and get better, significantly better. And we find a lot of team members wanting, just really yearning uh, to do things in different ways or do things more efficiently. And there's sort of sometimes a lot of inertia in the status quo and kind of the middle management layer, different functional units, and how those functions work and how they're incentivized and how they're measured. So getting leadership on board with what are our new measures of success? How are we going to incentivize people appropriately? The whole change management issue is really big. I've never seen any of these ideas not work for a technical reason. It's always people and change management and attitudes and behaviors and getting HR involved. If you have an internal change management organization, definitely want to get them involved. If you don't have an internal change management organization, you need to put significant investment in those activities. That, to me, is the number one predictor of success from what I've seen over the years in doing this. Is a lot of people don't know how to change the behavior of large organizations. It's exceedingly difficult to do. And people tend to focus too much on processes and artifacts and process steps and all that, which is important, but that's not what's going to make it not work. The reason it may not work is going to be the people and behavior side. It takes at least as much effort as all that process stuff. I think another first step is finding a pilot team, a group of people who want to do it. Because if you have people who want to do it, they'll figure out how to do it. And so you need to get early wins, get some momentum, and also show the rest of the organization that it can work. And also use that gung-ho, eager team to figure out all the gotchas and some of the challenges and let them kind of sort some of that out. And pave the way for others. So don't try to have everyone go down this path at the same time. That usually doesn't work out very well. But having a sort of set of green berets, if you will, are going to lead the charge and kind of clear the path is probably a good way to start.
All right, there you have it. Next question. Interested to hear how you transitioned your approach to requirements and releases from Waterfall to Agile. And also interested to hear how you reorganized into product-based teams and championed the product manager to product owner concept.
Yeah. And so a lot of this starts with education, certainly. There are a couple of things that are required. One is the burning platform. And people have to understand why we're changing and why it's important and why it is absolutely essential. And then we need to educate them on what some other possibilities are and kind of show them how it could potentially be. From a team standpoint, then team structures, that meant just working with a lot of functional managers and working with HR on finding groups of people who are willing to work this way for the initial pilot teams, getting people to change their assignments, getting managers to let people work in these value stream teams in support of a product and kind of stick with that for some period of time. So it's definitely finding a coalition of the willing, if you will. On the team structures. On the requirement side, educating people on what are MMPs and MVPs and the level of detail that is needed and required, kind of lightening up some of that in some cases and going deeper in other cases as well. I'm just trying to be a little smarter about that. I think in that particular case, on the requirement side, it's good to actually have embedded Agile coaches or consultants working with your teams, because you can educate everyone on the team, but as soon as you get a real problem on your hands, some people on their team are going to say, well, I think we should do X. That's my understanding of Agile. And other people are going to say, oh, no, I heard it differently. I think it means we need to do Y. And somebody else is going to have a different idea altogether. So they'll all hear the education, but they'll come away with different understandings of it. And you'll end up with all these roadblocks. So it's good to just have someone on the team who's actually done it before and is pretty experienced to help sort out some of these things, because they aren't always clear on what the right thing to do is. And so having an experienced person on the team working with them side by side can greatly accelerate getting through these inevitable confusion around what to do in certain cases. So that's from a requirement standpoint, going down that path. What were some other aspects of that one, Stephanie?
Yeah, so let's see. Also interested to hear how you reorganized into product-based teams and championed the product manager to product owner concept.
Yeah, some of those required very senior level executive conversations up on the top floors of the tall downtown buildings, if you will, in order to get the okay and the buy-in and the support from executive leadership to try this out. That what if we used our project money, which we've gotten funding for, and we're going to basically say, hey, product manager, here's your budget, here's the business outcomes we are trying to achieve, and here's a team of people front to back. Let's see what we can do about achieving these outcomes and giving them the cover and the authority to make those kinds of decisions and to get to start working in this new fashion. That's about really getting executive cover, if you will, and allowing us to run these experiments. And that's what these are. These are management experiments. Can we try this and will it work? And it might not work. And if it doesn't work, we'll need to find another way that does work. And a lot of this requires both executive support and then on the ground team coaching to just kind of work through the day-to-day. There aren't easy answers to these questions. I think every organization has its different culture, and trying to figure out how your organization works and what they need in order to move forward with some of these things can be a big part of the battle.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we've got a couple more questions coming in here, but before we get to those, I did just want to go ahead and close this out. We're heading towards the top of the hour here. So thank you guys all so much for attending this webinar. We hope that you enjoyed the presentation today. And actually join us again next week for another webinar. We'll have Jason Hall and Jennifer Hinton presenting on improving your team. Something's awry with my team. What's next is the title of that one. So details are coming to you after we close here. Be sure to check out our website for the latest information and follow us on Facebook and Twitter for live updates on upcoming webinars, events, and of course our training schedule. And if you're interested in signing up for upcoming webinars and don't want to wait around for our webinar newsletter, you can head to the LitheSpeed homepage and click on the LitheSpeed webinar series link to see all of those upcoming dates. And if you have any type of suggestion on what topics that you want to see covered, we are going to be sending out a 2-question survey following this webinar, so you can let us know what you want to see there. We're gearing up for the Agile Leadership Academy's second session of the year on December 11th and 12th for the leader's approach to scaling with agility. So a lot of the concepts that we covered here, definitely going to be touching base on those again soon. And that's a 2-day session that includes a site visit to a company that's currently undergoing some kind of Agile methodology transformation on a full scale. And then a full-day workshop after that with some pretty awesome networking opportunities with industry executives. So more details on registration coming to you later. In events land, we are already preparing for Lean Agile 2018. That's LitheSpeed's own little niche conference. It's a 1-day affair with 2 tracks of pretty cool content. Next year, we're going to be focusing on Agile engineering and DevOps. So you can check out this past year's highlights at leanagiledc.com and give us a shout at lsevents@lifespeed.com if you're interested in speaking or sponsoring for 2018. If you're interested in digging a little deeper on any of the topics that we covered today, links to the webinar recording and our contact information will be in the follow-up email after we close here. And we'll go ahead and take a couple of these additional questions. So if you'd like to ask us anything else, we will be available. If not, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. All right, so moving on, we have another question here. How does what you're describing here differ from SAFe?
I think it's a great question and a good observation. What this really is sort of a customized actual and somewhat lightened up implementation of SAFe. SAFe would talk about having epics at the portfolio level, for example, that are worked on in prioritized Kanban style, that I have product-oriented teams operating in a cadence, that we have portfolio management that is aligning around priorities for the upcoming PI, et cetera, et cetera. And so what we did was take a lot of those concepts, if you will, which are all fine concepts, and all of these concepts that SAFe is talking about are things that have been around for quite some time. And the SAFe folks have done a fantastic job of pulling together a lot of best practices into a unified framework, if you will. And so, does this stuff come from SAFe, or does SAFe come from this? I'm not. It's similar. I mean, all of these things kind of have their same origins, if you will, in that these are practices that have been around for a while and that work pretty well. And so there's a lot of similarities here between what we're talking about and SAFe. SAFe tends to be very, the training is very conceptual, and what we've been trying to do is actually put it into practice without getting all caught up in the language and the lingo and the layers and the roles and a lot of those things, but just do it has been our focus. And so it is, to some extent, a SAFe implementation.
All right, cool. Moving on here. This is kind of a long one. What trends are you seeing with stakeholders relinquishing the need to overload requirements that will likely end up backlogged and instead focus on immediate direction that will give them quick gains?
Yeah. I think working in this MMP thing in a continuous flow manner kind of helps. So a part of this I often think comes from the project mentality, if you will. When we use projects as our delivery vehicle, there's every incentive to load that up with as much stuff as possible. And when we we try to get out of that method of thinking and just ask them, what is the next feature that you want? Then maybe we can break that log jam. But it's very difficult. We've trained them over the years to tell us everything they want up front, and so they still behave in that way. And oftentimes, we don't have good data to inform us on what should be the next thing that we should deliver. And so getting actual production data can help inform us as to what the next thing could be. I think being very reactive to what's going on in the marketplace. If we say that some competitor just did X, then maybe that can allow us to say, well, we should do X and we should focus on X, and maybe we can get some focus that way. A lot of it is just education, and once again, having some consultants sometimes can help to broker some of those conversations, if you will. But it is, I feel what you're saying. It is very difficult to get people to just not ask for everything. It's a behavioral change. It's just going to take some time to work through. And I think one-on-ones with the business people can sometimes help in terms of getting them to understand the methodology better. Having all of those MVPs up on the wall and those little green cards and asking them to pick one that they want to push through next, sometimes that can help. So it's difficult, and I can't say that there's an easy answer to that one, unfortunately. But first of all, is breaking the project mentality, I think.
Yeah, and kind of going off of that too, how can an organization survive their rotation of leadership that valued requirements and the incoming new leadership either embrace those requirements or be agile?
I think we have to think about what requirements are and not get lost in the artifacts, if you will. For a lot of organizations, for a lot of people, we ask them what requirements are, and you start getting into various kinds of documentation and various kinds of specifications and all those things. And that's okay, and there's a need for all of that. But the way I look at all those artifacts and documents is that that's simply a form of communication, and there are many forms of communication. And so what I want to do is not limit communication to a big formal document. That's not the best way to communicate between what the business wants and what IT delivers. We may need to document stuff, but writing it down in a big document is probably not the best way to communicate that. Most folks know, I think, that the best communication is face-to-face, working together, big whiteboards, drawing stuff out. And Q&A and exploring edge cases and exploring weird scenarios that might happen, and working through that stuff together will probably result in a richer understanding. And then that's fine. Then go off and create all the documents and artifacts that you need to. So to me, requirements are a knowledge transfer, a knowledge acquisition, and it doesn't have to necessarily be only via paper. So if we can break that mindset, that might help. A lot of the organizations we deal with are Fortune 500. Many of them are heavily regulated. We have some government clients as well. Everyone has a need to document plenty of stuff. But what we want is for the documentation to be almost an output, like the software development. It's an outcome of these discussions and this tight teamwork and this tight collaboration. The artifact is not a substitute for the collaboration.
Awesome. Thanks, Roland. Next question here. How much business resistance was experienced during implementation of Agile MMPs and MVPs?
Not so much on the business side. I think, to be honest, some of the resistance was actually coming from some of the IT people in some cases. So in the past, IT was used to getting all of the requirements for a project at delivery start or at development start time, and then they would go through the prioritization process with product owners, of course, and then start iterating on it. But they could see all of the requirements that were coming and how they would fit together, and also they were able to better kind of allocate their team time because they could see how much work was coming, and they could just kind of get the whole picture up front. So there were some advantages to them to getting all the requirements up front and then iterating on all the requirements. So now we're saying, hey, I'm just going to give you this MMP this week. Can you knock that out? And in a couple of weeks, you might get another one. And that's a different way for them to work. And so that we had a little bit of explaining and challenges there. Nothing too bad. It's just a different way of working, which required explaining. We had issues all up and down the chain on the business side. Not across the board, but there are people who adapt well to change and people who don't. And so most of the issues are really about adaptability to change, changing how you work, feeling confident that you could be successful working this way, having the proper training and background and support so that you can be successful, and even understanding what your new role is. Because in a lot of big organizations, you have very well-defined roles with very well-defined inputs and outputs, and now we're saying, hey, we're going to throw you in a room and you kind of figure out what requirements you need, and maybe there are cases where you don't actually need a lot of artifacts and documents, and then people ask, well, that used to be my job, what do I do now? And so there's just a lot of that personal change management up and down the chain, and just helping people to be comfortable and get used to working this way. That's by far, I think, is most of the challenges.
All right, so we just have 2 questions left. What did you mean in more detail by pivot your presentation?
By pivot means making adjustments to what we're producing in order to meet the current needs. So it's just a common term out there. I think if you look up product and pivot in your Google search box, you'll find all kinds of things. But the idea is that we put small bits of features of functionality and stuff into production, and we learn things from that. We learn about customers. We learn about their behaviors, about what they want and what they don't want. And sometimes we have to adjust our next set of features and our next set of requirements to deal with the latest information. So when you're putting stuff into production more frequently, you should be learning more frequently and gathering information more frequently and reacting to that information. And so this is often termed pivoting, making small changes in what you're going to do next based upon information that the latest information that you have. What we don't necessarily want to do is agree a year in advance on all the requirements that are going to go into some project and then just start working it off as a checklist, and completely ignoring what's actually going on in production or what's going on with users or what's going on with competitors or what's going on in the technology space. Just trying to be a lot more flexible in dealing with the needs of the day.
Right, absolutely. Okay, we'll probably make this our last question here. How do you break up the monolithic platform to easily align with the value streams?
That's a tough one. So there is actually, it's not shown on these pictures, but there's actually kind of a fan out at the end in terms of I may have a requirements team that's focused on a particular product, and they're going through this discovery and refinement process, trying to get dev ready, stories ready. And at the end, there's a delivery team that's going to deliver this functionality. Now, in reality, in this large organization and in many large organizations, the people who do mobile work aren't the same people that do, web work, might not be the same people that do voice, activation work. And so at the end of this chain, there might actually be 2 or 3 teams that get a set of user stories. And each of those teams might develop those user stories themselves. The mobile team will take a set of user stories and implement it in a mobile appropriate fashion, and the web team might get similar user stories and develop those in a web appropriate fashion, and so on and so forth. So we still have these platforms, and we still have teams that support these platforms, and that kind of makes sense because there are certain technologies that are there that teams need to know. But what we're trying to do is not replicate everything upstream from those teams around all the requirements and capability needs, and so not letting a lot of redundancy seep in there. But there's a fan out at the end, and that the same set of requirements might end up going to multiple teams to be implemented. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Hopefully so. Well, okay, I believe that's all the time we have right now for questions. If you had something that we haven't answered or you want to connect with us afterwards, then feel free to reach out to either of us. Our emails will be coming to you guys in an email after we close here, or reach out to LitheSpeed at info@litheSpeed.com, and we'll be able to help you guys out with anything that you need. So thank you so much for joining with us again. We hope that you enjoyed it and that we'll see you guys again. And thanks to Roland for an awesome presentation.